Welcome to the Osmind Practice Community, the premier community for clinicians focused on breakthrough mental health treatment and research. My name is Sarah McGuire. You may have seen me around. I'm Osmind's community admin. We're so glad that you're here and think that you'll find this community to be a very resourceful space where you can share knowledge, learn more about the Osmind EHR, ask questions, and network with other clinicians. We host interactive virtual events every other week, so be sure to RSVP for upcoming events in the events tab. These are meant to be interactive discussions, so please feel free to drop comments, questions in the chat function on the right-hand side there. If there's time, we often will even invite you to come up on stage to join the conversation with other community members or connect directly with Dr. Carlene or our guest speaker. If there's time for that, we'll definitely allot and invite you up if you're open to it. But without further ado, I will pass it off to Carlene to introduce herself and our guest speaker.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So I'm Dr. Carlene McMillan, the VP of Clinical Innovation here at Osmind. And prior to working at Osmind, I formed a large interventional practice where we did deep TMS for depression, OCD, as well as off-label uses. And I'm currently the co-chair of the Clinical TMS Society Insurance Committee. So certainly can speak to a wide range of topics, but the main focus of tonight will be Dr. Khaled, who I've had the pleasure of meeting at the Clinical TMS Society annual meeting. So if you're interested in TMS, strongly encourage you to become a member or just check out the meeting. It's going to be in, I think, Denver this year. So this May, I think. Always great talks, kind of small field, so you get to mingle. But anyways, tonight we're very excited to have Dr. Bawashi. He runs the Florida TMS Clinic. Is that the official name? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he is well known for really having an amazing website full of really rich material about TMS, and in particular about various TMS machines. So I'm really looking forward to how he'll give us an overview about how he started his practice, and hopefully it will be inspiring for you guys as you're thinking about starting yours, or if you've already started, some tips for growing your practice, because I think Dr. Bawashi has really done a good job, really just like from the ground up, being very entrepreneurial, but also not running 20 clinics or something, like very manageable for people just starting out. So with that, Dr. Bawashi.
All right, thank you very much, Carlene. I really appreciate it. So my name is Khaled Bawashi. First name is Khaled, similar to DJ Khaled. I apologize for bringing DJ Khaled to the conversation. Still has to be. So I run Florida TMS Clinic. It's a practice that I opened at the tail end of 2019. And I would like to share some experience about TMS with you guys. I know that you already have experience with treatment-resistant depression, as most of you practice ketamine or esketamine. And I think adding TMS component to your practice would be very helpful. As always, there has to be some conflict of interest disclosure, and so far I have not. I don't get paid by any TMS manufacturer or any EHR company or any billing company, and no money exchange hands for this talk either. Everything in here is my own personal opinion, so take it for what it is, all right? So let's talk about our agenda for today. We're going to talk about why TMS is important, why is it important, how to start, how to get there for your goals, and the main pillars of successful TMS practice. When we talk about the main pillars of a successful TMS practice, that's when we're going to mention technology and the different TMS devices and what have you, which I think an important component for you guys to kind of understand which TMS technology to go with. Please ask questions. It would direct this conversation appropriately for what you're looking for if you throw a couple of questions, so that would help me kind of spend more time on the things that you're interested in. And then I'll turn it back to Carlene to talk about Osmind measurement-based care approach, and we'll go to some Q&As. By the way, I use different EHR than Osmind, and I did the demo with Michaela, I think her name is, and I think you guys have a great product. I'm going to talk about that when we talk to the pillars of successful practice, including EHR, and the ability to have a streamlined process of how to integrate patient information and intake forms and rating scales and what have you into your notes for your TMS visits is going to be very, very helpful. So we'll talk about that when we get there. All right. So why is it important to add TMS to your practice? You guys are already doing TRD, how prevalent depression is, how disabling it is, and how much money is spent on TRD or wasted or opportunity cost in there. So this audience is most likely aware of all of this. I'm not going to spend too much time in there. Disability-wise, it's somewhat between moderate and severe depression. You have cancer and heart disease. So this is how bad, how disabling depression is. We already know how difficult it is to treat depression. We already know that success rate after one medication is about 1 out of 3, second medication about 1 out of 4. You reach the third and the fourth, or you're reaching kind of closer to 1-digit percentage chances of improving somebody with TRD. And when you add cognitive behavioral therapy or therapy to medications, you have a little bit of increased chance, but it's still lagging behind. So we know that we need something more aggressive than our classical SSRIs and SNRIs to help patients, about 1/3 of patients who end up with treatment-resistant depression. So, and this audience is also aware of how depression is on the rise. This is going to be our major healthcare crisis, if it's not already, but it's raising to be our major healthcare crisis, mental health generally, and particularly depression and mood disorders. As you know, TRD is costly. There is an opportunity cost for the disability that happens when somebody is away from their career, from their family, from their achievements. Generally, you also, the treatment for treatment-resistant depression is expensive. With suicidality, you're spending time in inpatient facilities. You have partial hospitalization programs, PHPs, even classical treatments for depression, brand name medications. When you add augmentation, you're ending up with like Trintellix and Vraylar and what have you with $1,000 every month. So when you're looking at a cost per year, it's closer to $12,000 to $20,000 cost of treatment. That's if you're successful with such advanced treatment. We know esketamine nowadays and how Spravato, costs about $1,000 per dose. So we're looking at $20,000 for the treatment course over 6 months or so. And we know how difficult it is to treat treatment-resistant depression. So I don't see how you could escape for too long from adding TMS to a treatment-resistant depression practice. So I think it's a component that complements your practice for somebody who's doing ketamine or esketamine or generally psychedelics treatments for the reason of depression. So in my opinion, it's a must. I do understand if somebody is pivoting for now until they add it, but it's we're going to see a day if we continue to add more indications for TMS and if we continue to have more acceptance generally, particularly from insurances. And again, thank you, Carleen, for being so active on the insurance committee. The more that we make this available and accessible to patients, and the more that we relate the value of TMS, I think we're going to reach a point when you cannot credential an outpatient clinic without having TMS component in it, that insurances are going to payers or the licensing boards are going to require that you will have this component in any psychiatric practice to kind of add it to what's going on. All right, so we know that we need TMS. How do we start? Okay, so the start is what takes the most energy, right? And I think these are personal opinions of how you need to start. I think the start starts with the goal, right? You have to put a goal in your mind, because once you tell me your goal, it would be easier to kind of sort out the plan and how you're going to adjust and pivot over time. So those goals are going to be either personal goals or community goals. So personal goals are totally fine. And I want you to think about, if you decided, hey, this is something I want to do, I want you to get to a paper and write down your goal. Okay, what do you want to achieve from adding TMS to your practice? So for example, this is my own goals. I want to be an expert in TRD, right? So I wanted to subspecialize in one thing that I know everything about, and I want to be that expert. And as you know, behaviorally and how our brain functions and how long it takes for neuroplasticity to make a memory apparent when you're not thinking about it and what have you, it takes between, I think, 8,000 hours to 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. So that's why we do 4 years to 5 years of residency to become psychiatrists or chat psychiatrists, or in my case, I did internal medicine and psychiatry and what have you. It takes that many hours of training to get to a level of expertise. So you have to start at some point to gain that expert level at some point. And I want to use the most advanced therapeutic. And I know that most of you are also using the most advanced therapeutics, right? You know that there are so many psychedelics that are coming in that are going to change the way that we practice depression treatment. And one component of cutting edge therapeutics is going to be TMS. Even if you're not very happy with the outcome that we have today, things are advancing pretty aggressively, whether with individualized neuroimaging for TMS or whether with acceleration of TMS. So you have to be aware of that. And I want to practice medicine the way I fit, meaning that I want to offer things outside of the standardized healthcare system when all you do is admit and readmit patients from hospital in and out. So and I think you guys being in private practice, probably you share that same goal as well. If you want to practice without limitation for what you want to add to your patients. Okay. Your goal could be society goal. You could be, hey, I live in an area when there is no other TMS practice and I want to add to the accessibility of TMS. In my case, I want to make TMS therapy accessible and affordable to anybody who needs it. That's an end goal. When I have that, when I visualize that, I can make the plan a little bit easier for me for what devices I'm using, how am I setting up my clinic, whether I'm taking insurance, not taking insurance, etc. All right, so how to get there? That's when you're starting to form the plan, okay? And the plan for how to open your practice is going to include what kind of space you're adding in your current physical practice, the room that you need. It's going to include what kind of machine you're going to buy, which one of the TMS providers or TMS manufacturers you're going to be affiliate, purchase their machine and what have you. You're going to think about how do you get to the insurance coverage and how to get contract or add the fee schedule for TMS codes, to your already established contract with insurances. You're going to be thinking about how to acquire patients, how to educate your current patient load or current patients about TMS, and how to add some more patients in the future, whether from referral sources or from awareness, events and what have you. You're going to be thinking about how to streamline the follow-up of your patient throughout with rating scales and measuring the improvement that is happening, and how to follow up on those patients in the future in case that they need retreatment with TMS or they need escalated in the level of care to something else. So the plan, you always have to make a plan, but the key there is that you adjust the plan over time. Nothing is going to be bulletproof from the beginning, and every market is different, every practice is different, your patient population are different than other patient populations. So once you put your goal, you made a plan based on what you think is going to be the best fit plan, but then you're going to adjust over time and you're going to learn from it. I know you guys are in New York, so you know that Friends kind of thing, when Ross pivot kind of thing. So you always have to pivot, right? And learn from that experience. Oftentimes people, I know it's on the news now, like student loans forgiveness and what have you, and people will pay $80,000 for an MBA degree after getting their MD degree and what have you. And to be honest with you, it was on my mind at some point. I was like, you know what? Let me forget about this. Let me just open my own practice. And if I lose money, I will consider it tuition to the school of life. And I lost money. I paid my tuition. But it's always good to learn from your experience over time. This is one of our treatment room at Florida TMS Clinic. At some point, I want you to visualize how does your room look like, okay? What kind of machine, how is it looking, how comfortable your patient is. Have this vision in your mind. And then once you have made that reality for your first treatment room, you can replicate that in a second treatment room if you need it, and then in your second location if you had a second location. I probably would not go more than a couple of locations, to be quite honest with you, for one provider, and I'm not the kind of person who's looking into building a giant corporate or what have you. Not at this time. Yeah. Anyways. All right. So the key from what we talked so far is that for you to be successful, one, you need to make the goal and write it down and visualize that goal, make the plan for how to get there, and then adjust the plan as you go. Let me give you an example what that means for adjusting the plan as you go. Let's say that you decided, you know what, I want to focus on depression only. Then you don't have to buy a very expensive machine that is capable of doing OCD treatment and addiction treatment. So you know that you can actually do with a machine that is a little bit less expensive. Okay. And then as you're going through, you bought the machine, they did the training, and then you figure out that you're lagging a little bit when it comes to mapping your patients and getting that done quickly. Then you have to pivot. You have to take a week and go shadow another physician, see how they're doing work, get to train in their clinic under under their supervision for their patients until you feel really comfortable with that. So you adjusted the plan. You did not account for a week of shadowing somebody else. You did the course for TMS with the training with the manufacturer, what have you, but you had to pivot later on and adjust something in your plan so you become more comfortable with that. All right. So now I'm going to tell you about what I consider to be the main pillars of successful TMS practice. Okay. So number one, I think quality is one of the main three things that you have to have in your practice. Okay. And quality goes into multiple levels. So I know that some of those are a little bit towards the extreme of statements, but I think they're important to keep in our mind so we continue to grow. Being the best is not optional, meaning that you must be the best in your area, okay? And I put that in number two, that you should know your niche more than anyone else in your service area. So, if my service area, I consider it to be Wesley Chapel in North Tampa, then I should be the best in Wesley Chapel. But Wesley Chapel is not that large. So my goal was for my market to be Tampa Bay area. So I need to know more than anyone else in Tampa Bay area. And guess what? I have a lot of colleagues in the Tampa Bay area who are doing TMS. To be more specific, there are 60 TMS treatment chairs in the Tampa Bay area.
Wow.
Those are in 30 different clinics in the Tampa Bay area. And some of the big names are actually in Tampa. So that wasn't an easy task for me to kind of task myself with. But I got to a level when I know that if I'm challenged by any other psychiatrist in my area, I know at least as much as they know, if not a little bit better knowledge into things that just kind of emerged and came up. But that's important for you to kind of determine where is your area, where is your market area. You're not going to say New York City, all of it. You might say, hey, in Queens, there are 5 clinics and I'm opening there in Queens. I need to be in that area. I need to know the most around in my particular market area. Okay. And then the next one is that you should choose, you have to choose the best option for your patients. Okay. And that goes from which room you're putting the TMS chair in, to what TMS chair you're purchasing, to what is the EHR you're using, to how you're doing the billing. It actually gets even to the light bulbs that I put in the clinic, whether we're using soft bulbs or we're using daylight, bright light, because you could use light therapy for depression, right? So if I put daylight, bright bulbs, it's better for my patients. It's, the picture that you saw with one of the TMS rooms, it has a huge window. That was the best room in my office suite, and I did not make it my own suite. I gave it to the first TMS chair. And then when we grow to 3 TMS rooms, every room that has a TMS chair had a window outside, so patients will be exposed to Florida sunshine. When my office was actually one of the internal offices, right? So I always put patients first. And I want you to think the same way, right? Because that's going to improve quality. And once you think this way, you're going to grow to a point that we actually expanded to the other office suite, and I have my corner office now, and that doesn't matter anymore. You need continued education is not only for the doctor, it's also for your staff. You're going to notice that the TMS treatment sessions are done by a TMS technician, and I don't like the terminology technician. I think it was a misstep by Neurostar, who started the first TMS business in America. I think it should be called TMS therapist, because they're delivering TMS therapy. They're not delivering TMS technique. We have to change the terminology a little bit. And because there's a lot of therapeutic intervention and interaction happening between the TMS provider or treater and the patient themselves. But that also means that you need to elevate the level of education for your staff above and beyond. In my practice, I do have regular testing for our staff, when not only that the first couple of months they're learning firsthand from shadowing me and seeing how I see a patient, to how to use the machine and what have you, but also they do a test when they will have to score a certain score to pass the test. Otherwise, they do not stay in my practice. And that test, by the way, is available. It's on our website. Go to Florida TMS Clinic and go to the section for TMS quiz, it's called. And it's 50 different questions about everything in TMS. And the passing score is 35 out of 50. And you will get a report of your score and explanation, and there's a video for the Q&A. So you might want to use it for your staff and test their knowledge generally and see they sit there. Okay, and the next thing is quality improvement is easier to implement in private practice. Remember when we were in residency or in training or in a healthcare system, and there's always those quality improvement projects that we have to follow and what have you. And then you went to private practice and you were like, finally, no quality improvement projects. No, you still have quality improvement projects, but they're easier now, right? Every now and then you're going to look into, okay, this is my process. This is what I've been doing for the last 6 months or so. How could I find the deficiencies in my practice and improve over them? So that quality component is very important, and that applies to TMS and it applies to your ketamine and esketamine practice. All right, technology, and that's when we're going to talk about machines a little bit in a second. So the first pillar for a successful TMS practice is quality. You always have to improve on that. Number 2 is technology. You need to choose the best technology and you need to keep up with the best technology. So I put here, use technology to your advantage, your electronic health record system. And I saw Osmind. I'm actually impressed. You know, one of the most difficult things that goes into a physician's life is malpractice lawsuit and switching EHRs. Okay, so thanks God I did not go into a malpractice lawsuit so far. I guess switching
words.
Yeah, switching EHR is the next big thing. And to be honest with you, Osmind is nice enough that it got me considering that. And in a couple of months, I am going to get my office manager to kind of do another demo to see how it is. And here's why this is important. You guys have an easy way of implementing the rating scales and intake forms that patients are filling into the records directly. And that would save you so many clicks compared to other EHRs. Another thing is that what you did for esketamine, of how you're auto-filling the esketamine note and you're submitting that for the REMS program, also saves so many clicks. I know Carlene has some template for TMS. If that is standardized in the same way that the esketamine note is standardized, that's also going to save you a lot of time. The only issue it might be is that I think at Brooklyn's Mind, they're using BrainsWave. If somebody is using different machine, then you might need to enter different frequencies, because BrainsWave is, I think, 20 hertz, while other ones are 10 hertz and what have you. So there might be a little bit of variability. So it's going to need a little bit of technical support and what have you. And I'm happy to volunteer to kind of add for the aspect of figure of 8 coil workflow as well, in case that's needed. Billing system is very important, and I know that you guys have a good billing referral related to Osmind, so that's good. Phone system, texting with patients. You can today, your patients are communicating by text messages, and then when they're talking to you as a clinic, they have to call. You have to offer the texting component of things, and some texting system would allow you to have your main number as the text number as well. If a patient forgot their say insurance card or what have you, they can take a picture of it and send it in a text message, and then you receive it to your texting system and what have you. All right. Next one is know everything about the medical technology in your feed, even the ones that you don't have. Okay, so let's say that after you entertained everything, you decided, you know what, I'm going to purchase like a BrainsWave device because it has all the indications. I can do MDD treatment, I can do OCD treatment, and anxiety and addiction. Okay, and then a patient asked you about this new TMS method, which is accelerated TMS with functional connectivity MRI, that they're using a coil that is figure of 8 coil. Now, tell me about that. And you're like, I have no idea. That's not good. Despite that you do not provide that, and it's not offered in your practice, but it's important for you to know enough about it that when an uneducated patient comes to you and they're discussing their treatment options with you, you have all the knowledge to share with them. This is part of informed consent, right? So I want your knowledge of technology not to be everything about what you have, also what you do not have, okay? I joke sometimes of I don't use deep TMS when one of their salespeople contact our clinic. I usually tell them about their coil.
You probably know more about it.
Yeah, I know more about it than that. Yeah, I joke with them. How about the narcissistic personality disorder coil? Because I think you guys need that one. For your deep TMS. All right. Okay. Use modern billing solution and use modern EHR. I already told you about my impression of your EHR is really good. All right, so now next is going to be TMS devices. I want you, if you want more information after we finish this webinar, if you really need to read more about the different TMS devices, just go on Google and put in there TMS devices review. And then in the top 3 results, one of them is for the TMS clinic. Click on that option. At the bottom, you will have a table that compares every single device to each other, okay? And then you have a lot of details up. This is a table, the summary, but you can keep that in your mind when you want to see things next to each other, okay? We will come to this table after we finish talking about some of the devices in details, all right? So if we are going to specify a criteria for how to evaluate a TMS device to start to add to your practice, the things that I would consider to be important, you can add to this list, but I think this summarizes the main points. One is ease of use. Number 2 is quality of the product and the technical support that you will have with it. Number 3 is research and innovation. You want your TMS industry leader or manufacturer to be interested in improving and being on top of things research-wise and innovation. Transparency, so you need to make sure that there's no false claims from the manufacturer and what have you. Affordability, that might not be as important if the finances of the practice are not my duty. If I'm in an academic center and I want the university will buy whatever device I decide that needs to be bought, maybe that's not much of a problem. But if it's your practice, and I'm assuming everybody on this call, they're running their own practices, then you need to be very careful not to have silent partners with you. This pay-per-use model that some manufacturers adopt, I think it's a terrible business model for the businesses, despite how they could package it in a different way and what have you. You do not want a silent partner with you. If you want to go to Shark Tank, I think they would be happy to take royalty and what have you. All right. Number 6 is history and experience in the field. A manufacturer with history of many years is obviously has an advantage over somebody who just came into the market. I think just I think a month ago, there's a new manufacturer now that got an FDA clearance called, I think their machine is called Blossom. Blossom, I think it's a South Korean manufacturer. So I might need to add that to the list in there. But they just now came into the market, and their first device, even in Asia, was back in 2013 or something like that. So they don't have as much history and experience as other manufacturers. So now I'm going to talk about some devices. And again, if you have questions, please list them in the chat. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the chat or just the participants in here. Okay, all right. And if you have questions, you can list them in there so I know where to spend more time. But this list is not made as, of which one is the best. I made it in a way that I can explain the technology a little bit easier for you. So NeuroStar was the first American manufacturer that got an FDA clearance. And I specified American because they could claim that they invented TMS, but they did not invent TMS. TMS was invented in Europe, particularly in the United Kingdom. Dr. Anthony Parker and 2 of his partners actually invented TMS at the time. And that was back in 1985. That's the same age as I am. And at that time, it was a simple device. It was a single pulse device. And basically, they wanted to kind of see neurologically if it could help with MS or with some movement disorders. And we know how neurologists, they're a total failure, so they were not able to go anywhere with the device. So that's when psychiatrists came into the task, and they were like, you know what, we could use this device maybe for mood disorders. And that's when Dr. Mark George took the idea, when I think he was doing a fellowship in the UK at that time, and he took it to Charleston, South Carolina, when he ran multiple pilot trials until he decided on what is the best protocol to kind of go with TMS, and is TMS how we know it today. At that time, I think this company was formed maybe in 2004, 2003 or something like that, and they put money into the pivotal trial that proved the efficacy of TMS. And I think the trial was published in 2007, I think, and the FDA approval was in 2008. Why am I telling you all of this story? I'm telling you this story to tell you, one, they did not invent TMS, but they invested in TMS, and good for them, and excellent. They brought it to actual market, and they had the leadership for about 5 years because of the patent and exclusivity for about 5 years. None of those European manufacturers could sell in the US and what have you. So they penetrate the market really well. Okay, so I think currently there are about 800 shares that are NeuroStar in the United States of America. This is a very good number. And that tells you that patients are familiar with NeuroStar. And NeuroStar has so long time experience with training physicians, training staff, giving you the support and the training that you need. They have also very good advocacy at the FDA. So they're good politicians. That's what I'm trying to say. And with insurance companies, so they can advocate for themselves. So the type of coil that they use is figure of 8 coil. That's the coil that has 2 circles connected in the middle, similar to the number 8. And basically, with this shape of coil, the maximum intensity of the treatment is actually between those 2 circles. And that would mean that the treatment is very specific to the target that you're going with. Their indication is for MDD. The first protocol that they had was about 37 minutes. And then after that, they did the DASH protocol. So that means that the pulses are coming in at the frequency of 10 hertz for 4 seconds. So those are 40 pulses. And then after that, you have 26 seconds of a break. That's the old protocol. The new protocol, the break became 11 seconds. And this repeats for 75 times, and that would lead to 3,000 pulses. That's how the protocol is. And the main con, I think, with NeuroStar is what they did in 2018, which they resisted theta burst stimulation. So at that time, theta burst stimulation was FDA cleared after 3D trial. Theta burst stimulation will deliver the same amount of energy or the same stimulation outcome in just about 3 minutes of treatment. So you're using high frequency TMS to deliver the treatment. And NeuroStar actively tried to kind of influence that this is not as good. And I think politics and money played a role at that time. They were afraid that if they do 3 minutes of treatment, that means reimbursement for TMS is gonna go down, and that would affect the ability of practices to do the pay-per-use model and what have you. Anyways, they pivoted. Remember the pivot? All right. So they pivoted in 2021, and they finally had an update for their system when it can actually do theta burst stimulation. But that was, in my opinion, is late to the party. And I think the main reason why they added theta burst stimulation at that time is because what came from Stanford, from Nolan Williams about accelerated TMS, and they wanted to be still relevant. And to be relevant, you have to have theta burst stimulation. All right. The second con is that they do have the pay-per-use model. What does that mean? Other than paying money for the machine, which is not that expensive, I think $60,000 to $80,000 to get the device. But then after that, every time you treat a patient, they're going to charge you between $60 to $100, depending on your contract and negotiation with them. And whenever you hear that, whenever you hear variability in the situation, that you're in for a car dealership experience, how to negotiate and how to decrease that pay-per-use, it's going to be a little bit of a headache. So just keep that in mind, that there is pay-per-use, and that means that your expenses over time are going to run you a lot of money. And last thing that I don't like about NeuroStar is that their website directory favors some clinics and some physicians over others, which is usually, if that was a pharmaceutical company that is doing directory of who's there, say Spravato, Jensen had put Dr. Bawarshi because I do esketamine in a high volume above Dr. McMillan, for example, because she does not have that much volume. That would be a problem, that they cannot do that. There are regulations and rules that pharmaceutical companies cannot actually do a referral to a physician because the physician is paying them back by dispensing the medication or what have you. But it seems for devices, it's fine. And NeuroStar took advantage of this, and they're doing it on wide basis. So I don't like the way that they do it this way. All right. Yeah, so why would I choose NeuroStar? If I really needed a lot of support, and if I do not have the main decision maker on site all the times, and there's no physician who's involved all the times in the treatment, then support from NeuroStar could be helpful. All right. Second manufacturer is Brainsway. So Brainsway, I think they are based in Israel, but most of their clinical research is done in North America, in Canada, and the United States of America. They're very innovative and research-oriented. I give them that. They spend so much money on research. They are always pushing for new indications. As we speak now, there are a couple of clearance applications at the FDA for a couple more things or what have you. So they're always pushing forwards. They do DTMS stands, in their opinion, as deep TMS, and it is deep. So it's about 1.5 to 2.5 centimeters deeper in the brain compared to figure of 8 coil. The way that H stands for Hessel, I think, and the H coil basically has the wires, instead of being in circles, in 2 circles, like figure of 8 coil, the wire goes into anterior, posterior, and then it crosses again and crosses to the other side and goes anterior. posterior. At least that's how I understand H1 coil. H7 coil is a little bit more complicated because you have double cone coil and you have that feature of the H. And that, when you put it in this way and you kind of bend it over and you put it in a helmet design, you can deliver the stimulation in a deeper structure to the brain. But at the same time, you're also delivering the stimulation more diffusely. Okay, so in my opinion, I think D in deep TMS should stand for diffuse TMS. That's not the only reason. The reason because they trademarked the word deep TMS. And so to avoid that, I just call it diffuse TMS. So they cannot go against me. But anyways, the idea here is that if you are stimulating a larger area of the brain, you would not miss the target. And it makes sense to certain limits, but we know how complex the prefrontal cortex in connections to deeper structures of the brain, then that might not work in clinical life to as much. They have great support and great training. They have all the indications. They have more indication than anyone else currently in the market, and they're always keeping up with things. So H1 coil is indicated for major depressive disorder, and it's indicated for anxious depression, meaning that MDD with anxious distress features, meaning if somebody has an anxiety with their depression. They have H7 coil. That's the one that I was kind of mentioning, that it's a little bit more complex than H1 because it does stimulate bilaterally, while H1, though H1 will affect some of the other hemisphere as well, but H1 is more tilted toward the LPFC. The OCD coil H7 stimulates bilaterally. And they have the only indication in the market now for addiction. In this case, is smoking cessation, but I do not see a reason why this could be taken to the next step of opiates addiction and other addictions and study that and see if that's going to be positive or not. I know that they did, I think, H8 coil for alcoholism, and it did not work out, and they're going back to H7 now to see if that would work for it or not. And recently, Carlene also kind of shared with us yesterday that H7 coil is now cleared for the reason of depression. So that question is already answered now. If you have somebody with depression and anxiety, should you do H1 first and then H7? No, you don't need to do that. You can go with H7 coil right away. All right, so all positives about Brainsway, right? There's a few negatives, okay? So number one, it's expensive, all right? And when we're talking expensive, I think the last time that I kind of looked into the pricing and what have you, we're talking about $200,000 when the market usually is at $100,000 for other devices. So it's about twice the money. And then if you need to add the third coil, and I think that 200 is for 2 coils, and if you need to add the addiction coil, it's going to be $40,000 or $50,000, or you have to do pay-per-use. And the excuse for pay-per-use is, why would you pay $50,000 for a coil that you're only going to use for 3 patients or 4 patients or something like that? So it's less expensive and easier for you to adapt. Yeah, I hear the point, but if that money, pay-per-use, would be accounted against the total price, then I would do that. Then at some point I would have paid for it and what have you. So yeah, price is one thing. Superiority complex, that's what I was hinting to with the narcissistic coil, okay? There is this tendency of really standing behind the claim of deeper is better. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. Sometimes more specific treatments could actually be better in some situations. And there is a Croatian trial that showed a higher response with H coil compared to figure of 8 coil. But the primary outcome of that study was to look at remission. And remission was similar between the two. And it wasn't done in North America. It was done in a European country. The amount of how much they tried to push that particular trial was a little bit concerning, but that's fine. It's never bad when people cheer their football team or what have you. That's okay. It might be less tolerable than for some patients. So when you're stimulating diffusely and deeper, you could have higher risk of seizures. And to be honest with you, just kind of be scientifically correct, it's only the H1 coil that I think was thought to be high risk of seizure. Anyways, risk of seizure with TMS is very rare. We're talking about something that's extremely rare to happen. If you're stimulating bilaterally, meaning that you're using H7 coil, you don't have as much risk of seizure as H1 coil. It seems like if you stimulate bilaterally, you're not causing disturbance between the two hemispheres, and you have less risk of seizure compared to H1. But when I say tolerability, I'm talking about pain that could happen during the treatment. So there's some discomfort that happens during TMS treatment. When you're using the helmet design deep TMS, you are stimulating larger area of the scalp. Sometimes patients could twitch in their facial muscles a little bit more compared to a figure of 8 coil. All right. I don't know, since Carlene, I think you have a lot of more experience with deep TMS than me. If you have anything to add in here, that would be that, please.
Yeah, I think I just put in the chat, like you can definitely negotiate with BrainsWay, and they expect it. Actually, they probably won't respect you if you don't do it, to be honest. And they have some newer models. I think when we got these machines, we just did the pay outright to get financing. That was a big deal, like getting these equipment loans. But now they do have some almost like lease to own, like rental, like lower like risk things, because I think they recognize that their price point is pretty high. So I think the models are changing.
Yeah. So when you make your plan, remember when we said the first thing is can I determine your goal? Part of your plan in there is how you're going to cover the cost of your TMS device. If you're somebody who doesn't take loans and you're going to pay for it outright, then that might be a high price to pay for BrainsWay. But if your plan was already to lease or finance from the get-go, then you might be able to digest the cost of BrainsWay, because they do lease for 5 years when it becomes very affordable. And to be honest with you, the total price doesn't change then, because they make the money out of the financing company or whatever, some different way that it would be still the same price, even if you paid it on installments for 5 years or so. All right, the third device is McVenture. McVenture, I think, is Danish company from Denmark. So it's a European manufacturer that is, I think they were making TMS devices since the 1990s. And I think Dr. Mark George has one of his oldest machine that is McVenture and is still working until today. And he's very proud of it and all those kind of things. So it's capable of doing, it's figure of 8 coil. So it does a treatment for depression. And they had a second coil that they approved, or they got the clearance for it for OCD, and it's double cone coil. So remember when I told you that the H7 coil is stimulating bilaterally because it has those 2 cones of coils housed within the H coil as well. So this one does not have the H component, it just had the double cone coil, and it got an FDA clearance for OCD. So it's not exactly the same as is the de novo one, is the one that got approval based on its original research and what have you. This one was 510K approval, meaning that it's substantially equivalent kind of thing. For some people who do understand that, it's valuable to you. All right. Generally, McVenture is a reliable machine. It's versatile. It's versatile by that if something goes wrong, you can take that part, you ship it to them, they will ship you the other part. So it's more maneuverable than if you had everything housed in the same thing like a NeuroStar machine, when you're limited for what you can do and what you cannot do. You can add neuronavigation system to McVenture. It doesn't have neuronavigation integrated in it. It's reasonably priced. I think around $80,000 or so. You can get this device that you're seeing in here, which is capable of theta burst stimulation as well. They do have good support. And yeah, generally, I think as a machine overall, it's a good and reliable machine, and it could do most of the things that you want to do. What are the negatives about McVenture? It doesn't look good. You can see a piece of it here in the picture. I usually, when I'm joking with people, I'll say, you got a cart from Walmart and you started stacking some tools boxes on it. But that's how unpleasing it looks in design. For some people, they don't care about design. That's fine. But your patient does care about design. When your patient is walking into a clinic, organization is an important thing, especially if you're doing OCD treatment. Okay. All right. All right. The next thing that I don't like about them is warranties. So they have those tiers of warranty of whatever, silver, golden, platinum, whatever. It kind of like, what is this? Like airlines, what are we talking about? And they could upsell you pretty significantly with how much you're paying for the warranties and what have you. So it could run you $12,000 every year just to kind of. Why did I mention warranty in here and I did not mention it in other devices? When we talked about BrainsWay, for example, it uses air cooling. So cooling it is going to be through fans that runs through the coil, and it would take the hot air out from the magnetic coil and what have you. McVenture has liquid cooling, and liquid cooling requires more attention. Those who are video gamers or Bitcoin miners, they know what I'm talking about. If you want your processors and graphics to cool pretty quickly, you can do it with liquid cooling, but that liquid and electronics don't match really well. You have to always be on top of it and make sure that there are no leaks and no incidents and what have you. So if you buy McVenture, yes, you need the warranty and you need the maintenance plan with them. All right, so that's McVenture. All right, Apollo is another manufacturer. So Apollo, I think it's made by Mag & Moore. They're a German company. I think recently they got their distribution here in America got transferred to another company. So there might be a new company that is in charge of the distribution for them. You can see how nice it looks, like a Scandinavian design chair, really fashionable and what have you. And the structure that you see on this side and here, it's called hand system, stands for head and neck system. The idea of it is that they want you to put the coil where it goes, and then if the patient moves their head, then the coil is going to move with it. All right, that's the idea of hand system. It's a great idea on paper, but it doesn't really work in real life. Why? Because as you can see in here, the axis of where that hand system moves is about 2 feet behind where the patient neck is. So humans are made in a way, God made us in a way that we move our neck around our cervical spine, right? That hand system is going to stabilize the coil, but the access point of that hand system is 2 feet behind you. So the only way that it will track the coil is going to track you if you move your head this way, not against its own axis. So you could be within the hands and use your head or move your head against its own cervical axis, and you are not going to be on the spot of treatment. So for this reason, it gets the gimmicky call. Hand system is a gimmick, okay? So it's reasonably priced. I think they increased the prices when that new company kind of got the distribution rights of Apollo. And one of the pros of it is that it's very quiet because it uses a rubber material around the coil, and then that rubber material would melt down when the coil is heated, and that will dissipate the heat. So it's a different way of cooling, and that material actually decreases the noise. It is capable of doing the 10 hertz protocol. It does not do theta burst stimulation. And that cooling system is not very efficient in cooling. All right. I know that we're starting to run over time, so I'm going to mention the last two, and then we'll get to some questions if there is any. Next stim is a Finnish machine. I think it's made in Finland. So it's another European one that was made originally for neurosurgeons to do neuronavigation, to specify where are the functional areas of the brain before a neurosurgeon will operate to resect a tumor or something of the sort. Again, neurosurgeons are total waste, just like neurologists, and it did not work. There was no proven clinical positive clinical outcome compared to traditional planning of surgery. So they used this technology, like they were like, we have the device, we know that we can do this for depression, let's use it for mood disorders. And that's how it got licensed and FDA cleared for the reason of navigated TMS, okay? So it uses a structural MRI. So you need to send your patient for an MRI, and then structurally, not functionally, and that's something that we could talk about in different talks if we want to mention SANT and accelerated TMS, but structurally, you would know where you need to stimulate or to target the DLPFC. And then the 3D cameras of the coil will actually see where the coil is positioned. Basically, it uses infrared, sends an invisible light, it gets reflected on reflective spheres on the head, and then where the patient head is and where the coil is, and then you can match it exactly where it needs to be. That infrared technology is similar to what you use on your iPhone for Face ID and what have you. So it is cutting edge neuronavigation, I give them that. It's very well made device. Like I used it during Duke conference and it was really good. It's one of the most sturdy machines that I have checked. Again, they're going to use it for neurosurgeons. Those guys, they know what they're dealing with, right? The problem with it is that you need an MRI. And an MRI, unfortunately, so far, is not an indication, or it's not indicated for patients with depression, right? So it's going to be difficult to prioritize an MRI for a patient just for the reason of depression. And maybe the patient will need to pay out of pocket for it, or the clinic will eat the cost of that MRI. And you cannot upload an average brain MRI, which is something that you could do with, say, brain site navigation system that you could add to McVenture or something of this sort and still use it with that specific MRI of the patient. This one, you cannot do that. It has to be a specific MRI of the patient themselves. And then the disposable head tracker, because remember when I told you to function, it needs a head tracker on the patient, is disposable. So you throw it in the trash when you're done. And before you start the treatment, there's a code on each of those tracker. Those ones you have to buy from Nexting, right? And each one of those costs between $50, I think, $50 to $60. So technically it's pay per use, right? Because they're the only exclusively you have to to buy it from them. I think when I talked with them in 2019, it was $35 per tracker. And I was like, yeah, you could increase the price at any time. No, we promise you we're not going to. I'm like, okay, can I buy 1,000?
Is that, just to be clear, is that per session, not per patient?
Yeah, it's per session. You throw
wow, wow. Because like with BrainsWay, you have to buy the little helmet, like this, like swim caps, but it's per patient, like it's for their whole course, and they can use it again. And yeah, that's much better.
And by the way, with BrainsWay or even McVenture, if you're using the swim cap, or you don't have to buy it from them. You could buy any swim cap like that are made for the reason of TMS, and then you can use the same marking and what have you that you were doing before, and it would cost you what, like $10, $15 per swim cap, and you're keeping it for the patient for the whole time. These guys, it's actually per treatment, because again, when they designed it in the first place, they designed it for neurosurgeons, and you don't expect them to spend more than a couple of hours with the patient to know what they're doing and what they need to do, right? So it was designed this way, and they took advantage of that design in a way that they had like a backdoor to pay-per-use by having to buy each of those. All right, MagStem, this is the one that I use in my clinics. Just disclosure for bias in there. It's made in the UK, and I think the engineers that started this company were involved with Anthony Barker and his engineers at that time, so they kind of inherited a little bit of the technology from the beginning, and they have been making devices in Europe for many years before they entered the US market, after they were allowed to sell in here and got the FDA clearance and what have you. It's reliable, it's versatile. So it's also, remember the cart kind of thing? This is a little bit nicer cart. It's like a Target cart instead of Walmart cart, okay? Now they make it in a little bit better shape so it doesn't look as ugly. They have the Horizon 3 where it actually looks better, and the tower in here looks better. Okay, it's reasonably priced. You could add navigation component to it. They have excellent technical support and warranty. They don't have as much medical people involved as BrainsWay, for example, or NeuroStar. NeuroStar and BrainsWay have more medical people involved, not as much for MagStem. The navigation system is not based on MRI. So basically, it's a walk around the 5 centimeters rule. So with NeuroStar, MagVenture, and what have you, you're going forward by 5 centimeters to decide where the DLPFC is from the point of the hotspot. And that's the same idea in here, but using the 3D camera. So it doesn't really help with being more accurate. It helps being more reliable, meaning that every treatment session is going to be exactly where I decided the very first time. And in my practice, what I do is that we stream the screen from the STEM guide, from that navigation system, into my room at all times. I'm talking to you here, and I have my computer on the side, and it has all 3 rooms streamed in real time. So that helps a little bit with quality improvement and giving a little bit of neurofeedback to the technician, because they have the green box only when they're on the right target, compared to other machines when you don't know whether you actually kept on the target or not. What are the problems with it? You cannot really upload an MRI. So remember, when we were talking about NextStim, you have to upload an MRI. This one, you cannot really upload an MRI if you had one. So it's the opposite problem here. And you cannot even put like an average MRI to improve the navigation accuracy. And there is no OCD indication. So with MagVenture, for example, if we're comparing MagStem to MagVenture, has the DB80 coil that you can do OCD treatments. So far, this is not the case for MagStem. They always tell me that they applied and they're waiting. Next month, we're going to get the clearance. You always hear that from every manufacturer, next month, and next month never came, okay? And it's a little bit loud, which I think also BrainsWay a little bit loud, because both of them use air cooling. But that's not that big of a problem, to be quite honest with you. What's important is that air cooling is very fast in cooling. So both BrainsWay and MagStem are really fast. You can treat patients back to back without an issue of downtime and what have you.
Can I just say something about the loudness? And so I think that is something that if you are doing like esketamine or therapy in your office or anything, like you do want to be mindful of where you're putting the machines, because it sounds like a little bit of a quieter MRI with the knocking sounds, and you get used to it, but it's not the most peaceful thing to listen to if you're right next to it. So you space the room further back.
This is a very important comment that you made in here, because when you're deciding which room you're going to put your TMS device in, you want that room to not share important walls with the main psychiatrist or the main therapist or the esketamine or ketamine room and what have you. So when I told you I chose the corner office for that first TMS device Part of that was the window, but the other part is that it's isolated from the other rooms that I'm going to use for other purposes, because there was some kitchen next to it and what have you, so it was a little bit more isolated. So that's a very good comment. The other thing that I want you to be thinking about is that you can add panels that are sound absorbing that could decrease the vibration of noise, particularly with air cooling devices, because those vibrate a lot of air. If you have those panels that you will have in your home theater and what have you, a similar idea, they're made of fiberglass and what have you, and they look really cosmetically nice. Maybe they were in the picture that I shared in the beginning, so that would be helpful. In other offices that I had, I put like sound panels that you will see behind YouTubers and stuff like that when they try to decrease the noise and what have you, like video gamers that they have those panels behind them. So I put some of those panels, and that also decreases the noise. But yeah, that's something that is very important to be aware of. All right. So then after all of this, I want you to look at the table that I told you about that you can find on the website, and then compare all the devices back to back so you make your decision with knowing exactly that they match your goal. For example, if your goal is to have every single indication in TMS, then you know that you're going to go here, because BrainsWay has RTMS, ITPS. They have an anxiety indication, OCD indication, and smoking indication. So that's the most indications out there. They don't have navigation because there is absolutely no point in navigation when you're stimulating diffusely. Okay, if you wanted something that has navigation, then you have NextStim or MagStim. If you wanted something as basic as it could be, and your main thing is the price and the cost, then Cloud TMS could be an option, or Apollo could be an option. I did not give too much details about Cloud. More on that later. In a different,
after hours, off the record edition, perhaps. Yeah.
The last point before I finish is awareness. Once you have made, so the quality was important, technology was important. Number 3, you could have the best clinic ever. Nobody knows about it. You're not going to be able to help people. So you need to raise awareness, right? Awareness in business language is marketing. I hear you on that. When they hear marketing, they kind of get the cringe and what have you. No, you should not. Everything around you is somewhat an awareness or marketing or communication. So you can call it awareness instead of calling it marketing, but you have to dedicate time, effort, and money into that. And being a good doctor, not enough. You have to tell people and make sure that they know you're a good doctor. Plan reputation management before you start providing services. From day one, when you're meeting the patient, you have to know that every patient that comes to your clinic is an ambassador for your clinic. And that person could either talk highly about you, or they could talk negatively about you. So you need to make sure that you send those ambassadors to advertise for you and to raise awareness for mental health for you. And generally speaking, I think it's a healthy margins to spend about 20% of your revenue, not your profit, your revenue, on marketing. And then after you have good traction, maybe in a couple of years, maybe decrease that to 10% of your revenue. All right. And the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So I'm going to stop talking.
Awesome. And if you can flip to I think the next slide, I'll just talk very briefly. This was amazing. Okay. I learned a lot about the different devices as well. So just really quickly, I think Osmind started as a ketamine EHR, but we're really expanding. And I think as a TMS clinician, I find that it really has some great features. And actually why I found Osmind in the first place was looking for a way to deliver measurement-based care in an automated way. So similar to esketamine, you typically are doing patient-rated rating scales at the beginning and then throughout treatment and certainly at the end. So the ability to send things like the PHQ-9 and the Beck Depression Inventory every 2 weeks or so, just in an automated way, is really great. Plus the ability to do clinician-rated measures like the HAM-D or the MADRS within the EHR. There are certain insurance companies, and insurance will be a whole other topic, but certain insurance companies do require specific ones of these rating scales. So it's great to be able to mix and match. And then finally, most recent addition, we have the Osmind templates, which if you didn't watch the town hall, definitely check it out. We've recently launched the ability to do customized templates as well as purpose-built ones within our library. And if you just flip to the next slide there real quick, we can see that we have a template for TMS that is pretty customizable. So there's a lot of drop downs. So if you are using different devices, different protocols, you're able to basically customize that. And then if you want to take this and make it your own, you can also do that as well.
I did not see this during the demo. Did you just add this?
Yeah. So we launched Osmind templates earlier this month, and it's basically it's something that you can add on and you can drop in a regular note. So we're working on this. We'll be refining this and taking feedback, but it's fully customizable. We will eventually have something similar to the ketamine infusion notes and the Spravato note, which is really hard coded into the system, but we're doing some other refinements before then. So I actually think this is for regular practice. This is for your technicians. I think this works.
Let's say this is session number 5. Does it auto-populate already from session number 4, and then only if I have changes I can add them in here, or does it not?
So with our notes, they number the notes like automatically in the system, so you'll be able to see which session number it is. You can decide to copy from the last note that used this format, or you can drop it again. So I suspect most of the time you'd probably be carrying forward and just adjusting certain fields. But it's like pretty easy to just run through. I know in my old clinic we were using, I think, Google Forms for the technicians because our EHR didn't really have anything for this. So it's adapted for that. And eventually, of course, we'd like it to be hard-coded into Osmind, like the Spravato stuff. And there's a lot we can do with TMS, I think, to deepen integrations with manufacturers. And we've already talked with a couple about, certainly there's that interest there. It's just prioritizing things. But yeah, we're excited. And if anybody has any final questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can also put questions in the chat, like we'll post this afterwards, and you can certainly make comments, and Khaled will be around and I'll be around. I'm happy to.
You can always send an email to admin@Florida TMS Clinic. And usually Fridays are my admin days. Oftentimes I host other doctors from other clinics coming in, seeing how our workflow works and stuff like that. So usually those are Fridays. So if you ever wanted to kind of plan a vacation as part of your business, you can do that and come in on a Friday to our practice and then spend the weekend, hopefully without any hurricanes or anything in Florida, and enjoy the beach.
That's amazing. That would be awesome. Yeah, and also with all those machines, I think you want to test drive any of them. You go to brain stimulation conference or clinical TMS, it's quite the exhibit hall. Everyone, they go all out. They have their chairs. They'll test it on you. It's a whole to do, and it's fun to hear them hearing the latest and greatest. And you have to watch for the spin, as we've discussed. But
I remember I flew once, like it was just before COVID was like put us on lockdown or what have you in February. Flew from Tampa to New York just because I wanted to test the hand system from Apollo when I was just about to buy my second machine. I was like, should I get Apollo or should I get another Maxim or what have you? And then the only person that I know that he's using the hand system to see how practical it is was in New York. And I had to fly there for that reason. And that's when I like, no, it's gimmicky. It's not going to track the patient. It's even now, I think what Apollo did with the new company that is doing the distribution, they changed the chair because the chairs is not very practical. It looks really nice.
It looks cool. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very uncomfortable. I'm telling you now, it's not comfortable for a 20-minute session or what have you. So what they did is that they put a chair similar to the one from McVenture, and then they had an arm for stabilizing the coil similar to the one from McVenture, and that solved it a little bit more practically. And I think also they solved the problem with the cooling system, so they added an air fans on the coil itself to cool it a little bit quicker.
Cool. That's actually about the chairs that I know we have to wrap up, but reminds me, a con of BrainsWay is it doesn't include a chair.
Right. That's true.
When you go to the thing, they have a mid-century modern chair from Wayfair. We always used a barber chair. We have no idea how much effort we went into finding these chairs, figuring up and down.
I think the main reason is because every chair that you're going to get, it's not going to have height adjustability. Even if you get like a recliner or even it's going to tilt back and forth, but you want something that will raise up and down.
That's the barber chair. So if anyone needs a recommendation on the barber chair.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Because you can get a haircut under the coil and straighten the hair and whatever.
Yeah, but you'd think for a $200,000 machine, they could include a little barber chair. But anyways, this was great. So thank you so much.